Welcome to AEDT 3110U, Information Literacy. It's Assignment 2, Location and Evaluation. The group consists of Tasha Cowan, Diane Hunte, and myself, Sherisse Richards. The professor was Janet Simmons, and the date of submission, October 16th, 2020. This particular project has to do with information literacy and the process overall. We're going to look at the series of steps that we utilize in order to complete this process. So our approach to research consisted of the following steps. First, we met as a group collectively in order to brainstorm educational topics. We thought about things like multicultural studies, ethnicity and studies, but we needed a way to narrow it down further. So then we narrowed down a specific area, which was culturally responsive education. Then the second step consisted of our group creating a thesis statement. So we discussed relevant questions related to culturally responsive education, areas that we felt that needed to be addressed. After all, a good thesis statement does answer a question. Next, we constructed premises into a sound thesis statement. Third, we individually brainstormed keywords. So we each went away and composed a list of 10 keywords. Then we came back together in order to create one group keywords list. Approach to research continued. The fourth step consisted of us individually locating sources based on the new overall keywords group list. 5, we joined as a group to evaluate articles with relation to the thesis statement, and we'll get into the process of evaluation in the subsequent slides. 6, we organized data for easy viewing for later usage, which is in this presentation. The end of this presentation, you will see researched and evaluated sources as a slide. So let's get back to the first area, the thesis statement. First, we had to ask ourselves, what criteria are necessary in order to create a great thesis statement? It is usually just one sentence, not a series of phrases or run-on sentences, so our group had to keep that in mind. Also, as mentioned previously, a great thesis statement, it answers a question, so it is not a question. It provides solutions to a problem and a stance. It also helps the reader to know what the subject of the area of the paper consists of. Lastly, it takes a stand. It doesn't just simply address or announce a subject. Our group's thesis statement is as follows. More generation of increased funding, diversity in curriculum, and racialized awareness programs are required to improve the current climate of culturally responsive education in North America's K-12 classrooms. And here's the list of keywords that our group came up with when we met again to go over the words that we individually thought of. As mentioned, we had to omit some, and then we had to add some. I'll give you some time to read it over, and I'll just mention a few on the list. Culture, responsive education, kindergarten, classroom, equity, cultural diversity, cultural awareness, pedagogy, ethnicity, inclusive learning, multicultural studies. Take some time, feel free to go over the list. The next stage of information literacy, after creation of the thesis, had to do with locating relevant sources. Here are some of the challenges we encountered. We had difficulty narrowing our original topic at first, so that made it hard to locate sources. Also, brainstorming unique words and key phrases that were relevant and non repetitive. There was also a lot of information overload. None of us are scholarly experts in this field or have prior experience dealing with culturally responsive education in North America in the K 12 sector. So, reading over all the material and seeing everything that we were getting was a bit overwhelming at first. Also, when we went into the UIT library database and Google Scholar, we also found partial text for some articles. So that was a bit difficult because our group did want full text with relation to the articles. We also saw that some articles were specific to one particular ethnicity. So, for example, cultural responsive education with regards to Indigenous studies. But we wanted articles that were inclusive of all cultures. It was also difficult at first to decide what databases would best facilitate our topic search. And we also had a challenge of finding sources that were recent within the last 5 years or so. So after locating the article, then as a group, as mentioned previously, we had to evaluate their relevancy. And that's where we encountered a lot of challenges. Those challenges are as follows. First, we had to determine if the sources were even credible, if the authors had merit to stand on with regards to their publications. We also had a difficult time at first filtering facts from opinions, but then when we reread the articles, we looked in depth at what the authors used to support their premises. We also had to examine if there were biases from the authors, as well as work through our own preconceived notions and biases with relation to the articles or even with relation to some of the authors. It was also a challenge to determine if the findings, the articles that we found, were even useful and to find out if they would even help us support our thesis statement. The evaluation process also consisted of the challenge of identifying gaps and missing information in the articles. And last, sifting through works cited for validity and to make sure that the authors' works cited were inclusive of credible information. Here's a brief critical analysis of what was not beneficial to the process, as well as how those setbacks could have been avoided. So, first, we had a learning curve in the group's ability to analyze and synthesize and then merge the information with the knowledge that we may have had previous about the overall topic and area of interest. At first, to our detriment, we were missing some key requirements in the rubric. We did look at the rubric at first, but then we had to remember to refer back to it in order to stay on track. Another area that was challenging at first was we utilized a lot of single word searches originally, and then we realized that it would be more beneficial to hyphenate words, and this would allow our search to be broadened and more successful. We also had a lot of technological failures with WhatsApp group meetings and also with the Adobe Connect chat room, and that was a bit cumbersome at times. 5, we'd also say understanding the evaluation process and how lengthy it is also key, because if you underestimate that process, it makes it very hard to successfully filter through the information and sources that you really need to keep versus the ones that you need to omit. So here's a critical analysis breakdown of how those setbacks could have been avoided. If we had just spent more time brainstorming, it would have been very helpful. However, originally our group consisted of us being in other groups, and at the last minute we came together in order to form our own group. So That really was beyond our control, but it would have been a lot more successful if we had a lot more time in just having more material to work with. Also, if we utilized a broader selection to investigate more articles and more sources, that would have been very, very helpful and ideal. But we still did well with the time allotted. We could have used more of our critical thinking skills collectively. So even though we did converse as a group and then part to work individually, if we had more group meetings, then we would have been even more successful and not had as many hiccups as we did along the way, even though we did meet with our facilitator. Also, if we got feedback sooner in the planning process from supporting faculty, such as a librarian to help us with our search process to see if we were on the right track, that would have assisted us as well. It also would have been more helpful towards the process if we were prepared with a list of ideas and suggestions prior to meeting as a group, as opposed to creating the list and suggestions after meeting or during the meeting. Also, if we had tentative dates assigned with roles and responsibility with a concrete agenda, that would have been a lot more productive. We did create a list of roles and responsibilities. However, we didn't have tentative dates that were set in concrete, even though we managed to pull everything together. As mentioned prior, here's that list of organized data. It's researched and evaluated sources that we utilized earlier, or that we discussed earlier. And there are our photo references. Lastly, we just want to thank you for our time and wish you a great day.